Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really digging into the legal situation around Sean Diddy Combs. Specifically, we're focusing on Cassie Ventura's testimony, that recent federal trial.
Yeah, and our source for this is a really detailed recap. It covered the third day, Cassie on the stand, the evidence, the reactions in the room. Pretty comprehensive stuff.
Exactly. So, our goal here is to unpack what came out in Cassie's testimony, understand just how serious these accusations are, and think about the fallout, right? For Diddy's legacy, sure, but also maybe for the wider entertainment world. Accountability.
Definitely. We need to look at the specifics, the actual evidence that was presented, to really get a handle on what's unfolding.
Okay, so let's start right there, in the courtroom. Cassie walking in. What was that scene like, based on the report?
Well, the report painted this picture of almost a circus outside. Crowds, reporters, even banners, Some supporting Cassie, some supporting Diddy.
Right, that kind of intense atmosphere.
And then Diddy walks in and he's described as like radiating confidence, almost like he's untouchable.
Okay. And then Cassie.
Big contrast. She's heavily pregnant, 8.5 months, but the description is unshakable confidence. Not a lot of makeup, just resolute. And her husband was there, right by her side.
That image really sticks with you. Her, pregnant, facing this, with her husband there. It sets a powerful stage.
It really does. I mean, think about the courage that takes, given everything. It highlights the power dynamics right from the start, even before she says a word. Diddy's confidence versus her quiet strength.
Yeah. So against that backdrop, what were the actual core allegations she laid out in her testimony?
So it covered their whole relationship, basically a decade.
Yeah.
And the accusations are heavy. Abuse, serious control, and sexual exploitation.
And it's important to remember, this is part of a federal investigation now, right? It came after that civil suit they settled.
Exactly. The feds getting involved changes the game. It suggests they're looking at something potentially bigger, more serious than just a civil dispute.
Okay, so within that alleged abuse and control, the testimony about the freak-offs sounds particularly disturbing. What did the report say those involved?
Yeah, the details are grim. Cassie testified that Diddy forced her to have sex with other people while he watched. And these weren't like quick things. They allegedly went on for days sometimes. 36 hours, even up to 96 hours.
96 hours, that's 4 days.
4 days at these high-end hotels, The Intercontinental, Trump Gramercy, Mandarin Oriental, often using aliases like Jackie Starr or Frank Black. It sounds like a very deliberate, hidden operation.
And the level of detail reported is unsettling. It wasn't just the acts, but the environment he allegedly created.
Right. Specific candles, room temperature, certain lubricants, even telling people how much to tip the staff. It paints this picture of meticulous planning, almost ritualistic and, frankly, dehumanizing.
Totally. And then there's the alleged drug use connected to these events.
Yeah, that's another really dark layer. She testified Diddy pushed her to use ecstasy, cocaine, Molly, GHB, Special K, mushrooms. Basically, to keep her awake and compliant through these long sessions. She described getting sick, her heart racing from GHB, and maybe the worst part, Diddy allegedly watching sometimes via FaceTime, just treating her like an object in his, quote, twisted game.
It just speaks to that level of control, manipulating her physically and mentally.
Yeah.
Systematically breaking down her ability to say no, it sounds like.
Exactly. And the specific incidents mentioned, like the candle wax thing or being urinated on in Vegas back in 2010, they're just incredibly graphic. They really underline the alleged cruelty involved.
It's hard to even process some of that.
Yeah.
And beyond those specific horrific events, she also talked about a more general, pervasive control he had over her life.
Oh, definitely. The testimony reportedly covered everything: how she looked, her nails, her hair, what she wore, how she acted, especially in the bedroom. It points to this alleged need for total domination, not just physical.
Psychological, emotional.
Right. And that manipulation seems key. She apparently said she initially went along with the freak-offs to please him, that she felt it was the only way to connect with him.
That's chilling. That distortion of intimacy where trauma becomes the only connection point.
It really shows how abusers can create this warped reality where compliance feels necessary for survival, or at least for the relationship, however toxic it is.
So alongside the control and the freak-offs,
Yeah.
there was also direct physical violence alleged over the years.
Yes, absolutely. The reporting detailed numerous accounts, things like her head being, quote, mashed, being knocked down, dragged, kicked, stomped on, thrown against walls, pushed downstairs, even choked until she passed out. It's brutal stuff.
Just a constant pattern, it sounds like, not isolated incidents.
That's how it was presented, yes. A backdrop of violence for 10 years. And that 2012 incident at the Four Seasons, after some industry party, That one really stood out.
What happened there?
Allegedly, Diddy got enraged because she spoke to another music executive. He supposedly dragged her through the hotel lobby, trashed the room, held her there for 2 days, threatened her.
And nobody intervened.
Hotel security apparently didn't step in after recognizing Diddy, which just shows the kind of power he allegedly had. But crucially, Cassie took pictures afterwards. Bruises, split lip, red neck, evidence.
Photos are powerful. And speaking of visuals, there was that 2016 surveillance video that everyone's talking about.
Right, the grainy hotel footage. It reportedly shows Diddy dragging her down a hallway while she's trying to get away. She testified he'd taken her phone and bag that night.
What was the impact of showing that in court?
The reporting suggests it hit the jury hard. Seeing that, plus the photos of her injuries, it provides a visual anchor for her testimony about being physically controlled and assaulted.
Yeah, video doesn't lie, usually. So besides the video and photos, what other evidence did she apparently bring?
It was described as an arsenal. Text messages, emails, audio recordings, even a notebook she kept. There was also mention of a $2 million offer for a clean break, which could be interpreted as an attempt to buy her silence.
Okay, that's significant.
But maybe the most explosive part. Messages, supposedly, from other famous people. A-list stars, a huge rapper, a big pop diva, a veteran producer, all allegedly expressing shock or horror at things they'd seen.
Wow, if those messages are real, those people corroborate.
It can be huge. It suggests others knew, or at least saw things that disturbed them. Plus, texts allegedly from Diddy himself mentioning hidden cameras, making threats, friends backing up her injury stories, hospital records under a fake name, flight logs tying Diddy to the locations of these alleged parties, even her notebook listing escorts. It all paints a picture.
A very detailed, very disturbing picture. Given all this, why did she say she stayed silent for so long? What finally made her speak out?
Well, it sounds incredibly complicated emotionally. She apparently said she did love him deeply at one point, and tragically felt those freak-offs were the only time she felt connected.
That's heartbreaking.
But that love twisted into what she called a prison. She felt like a puppet, stopped feeling human. Fear was a huge factor, fear of his anger. But the most chilling reason reported, she stayed because he allegedly threatened her mother.
Threatening her mother, that explains a lot. That's a terrifying level of control.
Absolutely. It highlights the extreme pressure she was allegedly under.
So, switching back to the courtroom. How was Diddy reacting while Cassie was testifying? This powerful testimony.
Big shift described in the reports, that initial confidence. Apparently gone. He was seen panicking, scribbling notes like crazy, staring intensely at Cassie.
And then he had an outburst.
Yeah, the breaking point seemed to be when they showed photos of his alleged lieutenants, people involved. He reportedly exploded, started shouting denials, got kicked out in the courtroom.
Wow. Escorted out.
And his daughters were there, reportedly left in tears. Just a very dramatic, emotional scene reflecting the weight of it all.
Intense. Okay, what about the defense? What was their strategy, according to the reporting?
Well, his lawyer argued the 2016 video wasn't about trafficking, it was just jealousy. They tried to paint Cassie as someone who was in it for the money, pointing to that big civil settlement she got earlier.
The $20 million figure was mentioned.
Right. They also questioned her memory, suggesting drug use affected it, and picked at some date inconsistencies. They even called her former assistant to testify against her.
How did the prosecution counter that?
They apparently pointed out that Diddy had made payments to that assistant, potentially undermining her credibility as an impartial witness.
So typical defense tactics. Discredit the accuser, offer alternative motives like money.
Pretty much. But Cassie's explanation for the settlement, wanting a clean break, and her testimony about the threats to her mother when asked why she stayed, that seemed to carry weight too.
What about the reaction outside the courtroom? Industry, public.
Huge online buzz, as you'd expect. Hashtags like #CassieSpeaks, #DiddyTrial were trending. Some artists, like Kalani, were quoted calling for the industry to take a hard look at itself, accountability.
Any other names getting pulled into it?
There were rumors flying around mentioning people like Meek Mill, but the reporting was clear. No actual evidence about that presented in court during this phase. It's important to stick to what's actually part of the trial evidence.
Good point. Speculation versus evidence. Finally, the report touched on Cassie now. What's her life like today?
It's a really stark contrast. She was 19 when she met him. Now in 2025, she's married, mother of 2, another baby on the way, living a much quieter life apparently, with a supportive husband.
That's good to hear, considering what about her career?
Yeah, the report noted her music career kind of stalled after that initial success. She had a top 20 album early on. It suggests maybe the experiences she described really took a toll on her professional life, too.
A reminder that the impact of alleged abuse like this goes deep, affects everything: personal life, career, sense of self.
Absolutely. Seeing her now, building a family, finding some peace, it's a powerful counterpoint to the darkness she described.
Okay, so summing this up, based on the reporting of Cassie Ventura's testimony, it's a deeply disturbing account. Allegations of a decade of abuse, control, sexual exploitation by Sean Combs.
And backed up, reportedly, by a lot of evidence. Video, photos, texts, recordings, maybe even corroboration from industry insiders. The accusations are incredibly serious.
The implications for Diddy's legacy are obviously massive. But it also forces a bigger conversation, doesn't it? About power, abuse, accountability, and entertainment.
It really does, and the lasting trauma for survivors who bravely come forward.
For sure. Considering everything laid out in this testimony, the sheer gravity of it all, it really makes you wonder about the hidden realities behind the glamour. And maybe what's our collective responsibility as a society when these stories surface? How do we create spaces where people feel safe enough to speak out and are actually believed?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? Something we all need to keep thinking about long after the specific trial ends.